Welcome to the deep dive. Whether you are prepping for a meeting, catching up on a specific field, or you're just insanely curious about how pop culture actually evolves, you are in exactly the right place.
You really are.
Today, we have a massive, fascinating stack of source material to get through. Specifically, we are looking at an expansive, deeply detailed Wikipedia article that covers the careers of the legendary Australian comedy duo Roy and HG.
It is a remarkable document to read through. I mean, we are talking about decades of broadcasting history, cultural impact, media evolution, all packed right into these pages. It's quite the journey.
Our mission for this deep dive is to explore how two comedians, essentially pretending to be sports broadcasters, managed to sustain a career for nearly 40 years.
Which is practically unheard of.
Right. And they didn't just parody the culture they were commenting on, they actually became real-world cultural institutions in the process. And here is the hook for you listening. Whether you're a die-hard sports fanatic who lives and breathes statistics, or you couldn't care less about athletics and you change the channel the second a game comes on, there's a masterclass here in Deadpan satire.
Oh, absolutely.
We're going to be talking about completely made-up Olympic bids, fake talk shows, and a level of commitment to a bid that is almost unmatched in modern entertainment.
What makes this duo so uniquely brilliant, and what really stands out when you synthesize this source material, is their incredible adaptability.
Yeah.
They've survived and honestly thrived across radio, television, and decades of shifting media landscapes, all while maintaining these incredibly specific, unwavering personas.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because to understand the longevity of the act, you really have to understand the core dynamic between the two of them. The duo actually consists of Greig Pickhaver and John Doyle. Pickhaver plays the character of H.G. Nelson, and Doyle plays Rampaging Roy Slavin. How exactly are these characters positioned in their universe?
It's a classic double act, but it's got a very specific satirical twist. So Pickhaver's character, H.G. Nelson, is positioned as the overly excitable, perpetually enthusiastic play-by-play announcer.
The hype guy.
Exactly. He's the guy who treats every minor pass or fumble as a historic moment. On the other side, you have Doyle's character, Rampaging Roy Slavin. Roy is pitched as the retired sporting legend turned ultra-serious expert commentator.
Got it.
He is stoic, he speaks with this faux gravitas, and he acts as though his years on the field have given him some profound, almost philosophical insight into the human condition.
So they're essentially playing every sports broadcasting trope we've ever seen. But it feels like the target of the satire is a bit broader than just the guys sitting in the commentary booth.
That is a great observation.
Yeah.
The act is a deeply affectionate but entirely irreverent parody of Australia's intense, almost religious obsession with sport.
Yeah, sport is huge there.
Massive. But beyond that, it's a parody of the bloated nature of sports journalism itself. They captured the cadence, the self-importance, and the absolute absurdity of men sitting around in suits, analyzing a game of football as if it were a matter of national security.
And they never broke character. That is the thing that continually surprised me reading through the sources. You listen to them or watch them, and they treat their fabricated world as absolute, unvarnished reality.
It's incredible discipline.
It really is. It's like long-form improvisational theater masquerading as a weekend sports wrap-up. But surely that alienated some viewers early on. I mean, did the actual sports networks or the athletes ever take offense to this parallel universe they were broadcasting?
You'd think so, wouldn't you? But their approach was so deadpan and so thoroughly committed that it actually bypassed defensiveness and won people over. They weren't vicious. They weren't attacking the athletes maliciously. Instead, they employed a very specific guiding philosophy. There's a vital quote in the source material from H.G. Nelson's 1996 book, Petrol, Bait, Ammo, and Ice, that perfectly defines their entire comedic style.
Oh, what is it?
He described their approach as making the serious trivial and the trivial serious.
Making the serious trivial and the trivial serious. That is an incredibly potent way to look at media. But why do you think that specific formula resonated so deeply with the public?
Well, if you think about the psychology of it, we are constantly bombarded by the hyper-serious nature of the daily news cycle.
Everything is breaking news.
Exactly. And sports media often mimics that urgency. We're told every grand final is the most important event in history. By treating a monumental sporting event like a casual afterthought, and simultaneously treating some bizarre, obscure detail like a player's fictional hobby, as if it's the most important thing in human history, they expose the artificial stakes of the media. It gives you, the audience, permission to enjoy the spectacle of sport without being emotionally manipulated by the hype.
It's a massive relief valve.
Precisely.
That makes total sense. It cuts through the noise and lets you just laugh at how seriously we take ourselves. And that philosophy clearly worked because they absolutely conquered the radio landscape. Let's talk about where this really took root, the Triple J era.
A legendary run.
Yeah. For those listening who might not be familiar with the Australian broadcasting landscape, what exactly is Triple J and why was it significant that they started there?
Triple J is Australia's national youth broadcaster. Historically, it's known for alternative music, grunge, counterculture, pushing boundaries.
Right, so not exactly the traditional home of sports radio.
Not at all. So having a multi-hour weekend sports show on a youth network that was traditionally anti-establishment was always a juxtaposition. It was the perfect incubator for a show that was essentially a subversive parody of the establishment.
And it wasn't just a brief experiment. They hosted this live, improvised, satirical radio program called This Sporting Life on Triple J from 1986 all the way to 2008.
22 years.
22 years. It ultimately became the longest-running program in the history of the station. The source notes that its cultural significance was so massive that in 2013, it was added to the National Film and Sound Archive's Sounds of Australia registry.
And let's not forget the critical acclaim. A 30th anniversary retrospective collection of the show actually won an ARIA award, which is Australia's premier music industry award.
Wow.
For Best Comedy Release in 2016. They were consistently putting out comedy albums based on their radio work going back to the late 80s and early 90s with brilliant pun-heavy titles like Pound for Pound and Wicket to Wicket.
So they're basically building an empire on audio.
Right.
But how did they expand beyond just a weekly studio show?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, what's remarkable is that they recognized that the ultimate medium for their satire was live, momentous events. So they started broadcasting live alternative commentaries.
Live commentary. That is bold.
Very. They didn't just talk about the games after the fact, they called them live. They covered the major rugby league and Aussie rules grand finals.
They called those the Festival of the Boot, parts 1 and 2, right?
Correct. They also called the Melbourne Cup, which is Australia's most famous horse race, and they did live commentary for the State of Origin, which is arguably Australia's most fiercely contested tribal rugby league rivalry.
So people could just tune into them instead.
Exactly. They offered the public a parallel broadcast universe. You could turn down the volume on your television broadcast with the serious commentators, turn off the radio, and experience the biggest sporting events in the country entirely through the surreal lens of Roy and HG.
That is such a brilliant concept. You're actively choosing to watch the real event but consume their fictionalized narrative of it. And they didn't even limit themselves strictly to sports. I read that they applied this exact same sports commentary style to the 1988 bicentennial celebrations.
They did.
They even covered the 2007 Australian federal election.
Yes, which they titled Indecision '07.
What's fascinating there is how they could take a polarizing, highly charged political event like a federal election and strip the partisanship right out of it.
Right.
By filtering the election entirely through the neutral, ridiculous, hyper-analytical lens of sports commentary, they managed to impartially report on the political process without taking any political sides whatsoever.
Right.
It just proves how versatile their formula was.
And that versatility is exactly why they have endured for so long. Their journey through the radio landscape alone is an incredible testament to their staying power.
Yeah, they really moved around.
They did. After leaving Triple J in 2008, they simply adapted. They moved to the commercial Triple M network for shows like The Life and later The Sporting Probe. They had a stint on Macquarie Sports Radio with a show called Just Short of a Length, and ultimately they returned to ABC Radio.
Which brings us right up to the present day. The source material highlights their 2024 Paris Olympics show, People, Medals, and Cheese.
Great title.
It's so good. And their ongoing Saturday afternoon show, Bludging on the Blind Side. Almost 40 years later, they're still finding new ways to talk about sports and culture. Athletes retire, entire sports leagues change their formats, but the underlying culture of sports broadcasting...
The ego, the commercialism, the hype.
Yeah, all of that, it never really changes. So their satire literally never goes out of date.
Precisely. They tapped into a permanent vein of cultural absurdity.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Because they didn't just conquer radio, they took over television, and they eventually came to completely own the Olympic Games in Australia. How does a duo whose entire act relies on the theater of the mind in a radio booth translate that to a visual medium?
It took some experimentation. It started with some really avant-garde early TV appearances. In 1988, they were on an ABC show called Blah, 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 and the visual gag was that they were only seen in silhouettes.
Just silhouettes.
Just silhouettes.
Huh?
With a great visual metaphor for radio broadcasters trying to figure out how to exist on television.
But they clearly figured it out eventually. By the mid-90s, they were hosting Club Buggery. And think about how wild this is. These two guys doing a subversive parody of traditional broadcasting actually end up winning a Logie, which is essentially Australia's equivalent of an Emmy,
Right.
for Most Outstanding Achievement in Comedy in 1997. The establishment they were actively mocking was now handing them trophies.
It's the ultimate irony.
Yeah.
But the absolute television goldmine, the thing that catapulted them into the stratosphere and made them household names, was the Sydney 2000 Olympics.
The big one.
The big one. They hosted a show called The Dream with Roy and HG. This was broadcast on the Commercial 7 network, and it was a massive, top-rating late-night commentary and interview program. It was so successful it spawned an entire franchise of Olympic coverage.
It really became a staple.
It did. They went on to do the Ice Dream for the 2002 Salt Lake City Winter Olympics, the Cream for the 2003 Rugby World Cup, and the Dream in Athens for the 2004 Olympics.
I really want to dive into the comedic mechanics of how they made the Olympics so funny, because the notes give us some brilliant examples here. It wasn't just about making fun of the sports themselves, was it?
No, it was much more layered than that. They used a mock-serious tone to state completely fictitious facts about the real athletes they were watching.
So they would just lie about them.
Essentially, yes. They would make up bizarre occupations, completely fabricated histories, and weird personality quirks for these elite competitors from around the world. So, instead of a tragic backstory designed to make you cry, Roy and HG would calmly explain that a world-class European gymnast was actually a part-time forklift driver with a passion for collecting ceramic frogs.
That is hilarious. It completely undercuts the manipulative human interest fluff pieces that usually dominate Olympic coverage. You're watching a world-class athlete perform incredible feats, while the commentators earnestly discuss their fictional ceramic frog collection.
And they extended that world building to the venues themselves. They invented terminology to describe the action. When they covered the Salt Lake City Winter Olympics for the Ice Dream, they confidently claimed that a specific treacherous section of the real luge track was officially known as Gobbler's Gulch.
Gobbler's Gulch.
Just completely deadpan.
Yeah.
If you were casually flipping channels, you would have absolutely no reason to doubt that the official Olympic name for that turn was Gobbler's Gulch.
I saw a mention in the notes regarding that 2002 Winter Olympics coverage about something called the Smiggin Holes bid. What on earth was that?
This is perhaps one of the greatest long-running gags in Australian television history. During the Ice Dream, they launched a completely fake, elaborate campaign to host the upcoming 2010 Winter Olympics in a tiny, real-world Australian ski resort area called Smiggin Holes.
A fake bid for a real town.
Yes, and they went all in. They treated it with the utmost geopolitical seriousness.
Did they actually have a pitch for this tiny place?
No, they had an entire marketing campaign. They generated absurd slogans and delivered them with absolute sincerity. They pitched slogans like Unleash the Mighty Mongrel and Winter Wonder Down Under. But the absolute best one, which they pitched with a straight face to their audience, was, if you've got the poles, we've got the holes.
That is absurd. The sheer audacity to pitch, if you got the poles, we've got the holes on a major commercial television network during the actual Olympics is incredible.
It's pure genius.
It's the ultimate expression of making the trivial serious. They took the immense billion-dollar machinery of an Olympic bidding process and reduced it to a cheeky rhyme about a place called Smiggin Holes. But did the networks always love this level of unpredictability?
Not always. There's a great moment of industry reality in the source text regarding the 2008 Beijing Olympics. Channel 7 actually didn't select them to cover Beijing.
Oh, really?
According to the sources, there were security concerns, and Channel 7 management felt that their specific style, which relied on airing live late at night, reviewing the day's events in a studio, just wouldn't suit the Australian time zones for Beijing.
So what happened? Did they just sit that Olympics out?
Not at all. They simply pivoted back to their roots. They went down the street to Triple J Radio and created a daily program called The Golden Ring Show, where Roy was styled as Crouching Tiger and HG as the Hidden Dragon. You lock them out of the television studio, they just go to the radio booth and keep the bit going?
Exactly.
They just could not be stopped. Now, everything we've talked about so far feels incredibly tailored to an Australian audience. Did this hyper-localized comedy translate overseas at all?
Surprisingly, yes. It's easy to think of their comedy as something only locals would understand, but the themes they were playing with translated really well. They were essentially exporting a highly satirical version of Australian masculinity.
How so? What does that satirical masculinity look like for a listener who might not be familiar with it?
It's a parody of mateship, stoicism, the pub culture vernacular, and this deep-seated cultural obsession with giving everyone a fair go. It's the image of the rugged Aussie bloke who has an opinion on everything and speaks entirely in baffling idioms.
Okay, I can picture that. And the UK audience in particular found that hilarious. In 1997, Roy and HG actually fronted an ad campaign in the United Kingdom for Foster's Lager. Their tagline for the campaign was, "Tickle it, you wrigglers."
Tickle it, you wrigglers!
They even became recurring guests on The Ben Elton Show on BBC One in 1998.
That leads perfectly into a show they did in 2005, which is mentioned in the notes, the Memphis Trousers Half Hour. What was the premise of that project? Because the background on this sounds completely surreal.
It was an incredibly bizarre and layered concept for a show on ABC TV. It was presented as a talk show that was supposedly filmed in various American cities, places like Baltimore or Albuquerque.
Okay.
The premise was that Roy and HG were bringing brand new, essential, and completely fabricated facts about Australia directly to the American public. But the twist is that it wasn't filmed in America at all. It was filmed entirely in a studio in Sydney.
So they were faking the location, faking the facts they were delivering, and parodying the format of the classic American talk show all at once. And the name of the show itself is a layered joke, right?
Yes. The title, The Memphis Trousers Half Hour, comes from a very specific, real historical incident where the former Australian Prime Minister Malcolm Fraser famously lost his trousers in a Memphis hotel.
Taking a strange, slightly embarrassing footnote in political history and using it as the title for a fake American talk show filmed in Sydney is just a stroke of comedic genius.
It perfectly encapsulates their style.
It really does. They take a strange fragment of reality and build an entire surreal universe around it without ever winking at the camera.
Exactly. It requires a tremendous amount of discipline to never let the audience see you laugh at your own joke.
So what does this all mean? We've covered radio dominance, winning Logie and ARIA awards, faking Olympic bids, and inventing terminology that entered the public lexicon. The key takeaway for you, listening to this deep dive, is the sheer power of commitment to a bit.
Unwavering commitment.
By treating the trivial as serious, and the serious as trivial for nearly 40 years, Roy and HG created a beloved alternate universe. They built a world of sports and culture that has quite literally outlasted the very broadcasters, the networks, and the athletes they were originally parodying. They became the establishment by making fun of the establishment.
This raises an important question. And there is one final fascinating fact from the source material that we haven't discussed yet, which perfectly highlights this transition from parody to actual cultural institution.
What is it?
In 2001, a visual artist named Paul Newton painted a portrait of Roy and HG. Now, this didn't just hang quietly in a local obscure gallery. This portrait was entered into the Archibald Prize, which is arguably Australia's most prestigious fine art portrait competition.
Wait, a portrait of two fictional sports commentators was entered into the most prestigious fine art competition in the country.
Yes, and it didn't just enter, it won.
It won.
It won the Packing Room Prize, and it won the People's Choice Award.
That is unbelievable.
So I want to leave you with this thought to mull over. What does it actually say about the nature of modern culture when a satirical, completely fictionalized sports broadcasting duo ends up being immortalized and celebrated by the public in one of a country's most respected fine art institutions? Where exactly is the line between parodying national treasures and actually becoming them?
That is such a profound question to end on. If you pretend to be a legend long enough with enough conviction, maybe you just become one. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you enjoyed exploring the bizarre, brilliant, and deeply committed world of Roy and HG with us.
It's been a pleasure to unpack all of this. Keep questioning the serious things in life, and maybe take a moment to appreciate the trivial a little bit more.
Well said. Thanks for listening, and we will catch you on the next deep dive.